So you've bought your camera, sorted your lens, and now you want to get out and take some brilliant pictures. Well, today's cameras come with all sorts of different exposure modes to help you get that perfect image. But what do all those letters and symbols on the dial really mean? Well, in today's video, I'm going to explain all the different exposure modes that can help you take better photos. Let's get started. Let's start with the mode that most newcomers to photography will explore first, and this is auto, typically identified by a green square on the mode dial. When using auto, the camera makes all the important decisions, that's shutter speed, aperture and ISO, to try and deliver a balanced exposure in your image. The good news is that this often results in well-exposed images, but that comes at a cost, and the compromise is that you don't have any creativity over your image. And this is bad if you want to progress your photography and move it on to the next level. P stands for program, and in this mode it's very similar to auto, although you can make adjustments to aperture or exposure compensation. To really get creative, it's best to move away from auto and program and move into the semi-automatic modes on your camera. That's shutter and aperture priority. Let's talk about aperture priority first, and this is identified by A or AV on your camera dial. In this mode, you as the photographer take control of the aperture in the frame, so you can decide what sort of depth of field you want to create in your image. You might want to go for a shallow depth of field when you're taking portraits to isolate your subject. Alternatively, you might want a nice wide depth of field if you're shooting landscapes. When you're working in aperture priority, you select the F number and the camera selects the shutter speed to deliver a balanced exposure. So let's reverse that. If you shoot shutter priority, which is S or TV on your mode dial, you select the shutter speed while the camera selects the aperture for a balanced exposure. Shutter priority is great when you want to actually slow down or speed up the shutter speed in your frame. So if you're shooting a long exposure, or if you're doing panning shots of, say, a cyclist riding past on their bike. So if you really want to take full control of your settings, then it's time to switch the mode dial to M for manual. It's in this mode when you're in charge of the shutter speed, aperture and ISO, the three sides of the exposure triangle. Manual mode is preferable if you're shooting with an external light source, such as a flash gun, so you can properly take control of the exposure. Manual mode is also preferable if you want to shoot, say, a long exposure with an ND filter. This way, you can control the shutter speed as well as keeping the aperture to a mid-F number such as f11. Wait, don't go yet, there's even more modes on the camera dial to explain. Bulb mode, for example, can be really useful when shooting ultra-long exposures. In this mode, the shutter will stay open as long as the button is pressed. That means you can have shutter speeds from 20 seconds to 2 minutes to 20 minutes if your battery allows. It's for this reason that photographers tend to use bulb mode when shooting astrophotography, because the low light conditions demand longer shutter speeds. Scene modes are preset exposure modes that will help photographers learn the settings to favour certain photographic situations, such as using a large aperture for portraits and the opposite for landscapes. For sports scenes, the camera will use a faster shutter speed to freeze the action, and for winter scenes, the camera will even attempt to compensate for white snow. So we've talked about auto mode, we've talked about semi-automatic modes, manual mode, bulb mode and scene modes. Whichever mode helps you take brilliant images, enjoy your image making. See you next time.